Hello everyone and welcome. Recently we have had the return of some Metroid Prime Trilogy remake rumors, and even some suggesting only the first game is being remade from the ground up in a new engine. Other interesting rumors on Metroid Prime 4 have released. I know, we have literally been getting Metroid Prime Trilogy HD rumors for almost 10 years, since the release of the Wii U. However, I think there may be some truth behind it, as well as some crazy coincidental details, interviews, and even official statements that back this up. Reggie and Nintendo confirmed a Metroid game for Wii U was being developed, and would be a surprise. This is a bit more of a casual video. We had a discussion on all of this on our podcast, the Hylian Gamescast. Obviously, not every rumor or leak is true. Most are made up for attention or other reasons, and only a few end up being correct. Taking a look at someone's track record is an easy way to tell. From everything we will cover here, it seems the Metroid Prime rumors had a mix of both. Let's begin with the most recent and more credible rumors from Emily Rogers, who I know a lot of people don't have faith in, but someone actually did list out every single rumor and leak she has made and compared them. At the time, she had 22 correct, 5 wrong, and 3 that were kind of right. And a lot of the correct leaks were very specific, not stuff that you could just guess. A couple that were wrong would later be said to have just changed before release, which for Zelda fans is something we've gotten used to. Yes, this is an older list, but a look at newer leaks, shows she has gotten even more accurate. Notably, when the world seemed to laugh at her for saying Ubisoft was developing a Mario and Rabbids crossover game. So now that we have her almost always correct track record covered, along with documented proof, let's get to this recent Metroid Prime rumor. In September, she stated, "Last I heard, Nintendo was busy working on Metroid Prime 1 to celebrate the game's 20th anniversary in 2022. I'm not sure if we're getting a trilogy or just a re-release of the first game, but I'm leaning more towards the latter. But I hope we get the former." During a conversation on Twitter in November, she gave more details and an update. "I'm pretty confident Metroid Prime 1 wrapped up development over the summer. I hope we still see the entire trilogy on Switch, but Prime 1 is clearly finished. Work on Metroid Prime 1 Remastered started around 2017 or 18. Original plan was to develop and release Prime 1 first, then use Prime 1's foundation, engine, tools, assets to recreate Prime 2 and 3 later. Nobody knows if plans were changed or axed after COVID. It would be cool if Nintendo sticks to their original plan and bring all 3 Metroid Primes to Switch. I'm rooting for the best possible scenario here. Only thing I can confirm at the moment is Prime 1 exists, and it just wrapped up development over the summer." It seems we have another version of a Metroid Prime rumor that we see popping up 2 or 3 times per year for the last 10 years, but this time we have reliable people with a great track record saying it. It reminded us of the Zelda Netflix movie rumors, which also reappeared every few months, year after year, and surprisingly ended up being true, but sadly cancelled by Miyamoto literally because it was leaked to the public, and would no longer be a surprise. So if these new rumors are true, as almost all of her leaks are, could the original Metroid Prime rumors have also been true? Looking at Metroid Prime 4, it is believed to have began production in 2017 by an unannounced team. It was later leaked and confirmed to have been Bandai Namco. Then Retro took over and restarted the game in 2019. At first, some may think, why Bandai Namco? It seems Nintendo had a lot of faith in them as they either solely developed or helped on multiple games, including Pokken Tournament, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Mario Kart, and after moving from Metroid Prime 4, they continued collaborating with Nintendo and released new Pokemon Snap in 2021. Retro Studios' first game was Metroid Prime 1. They also developed 2, 3, the Trilogy Collection, and other Nintendo franchise games. So they are the obvious choice for Nintendo to turn to in order to restart development. The question keeps coming up though. What unannounced game were they working on before switching to Metroid Prime 4? They haven't had a new game in almost 7 or 8 years, unless you count the port of Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze for Switch in 2018. But we know they spent most of that time working on other games. The last release before the port was the original Wii U version of Tropical Freeze. The original took about 3 years to develop and release. So why would a simple port with minor changes take an entire year longer, 4 years, than it did to first develop the game from the ground up? From interviews with Nintendo and other developers, Ports like this only take around 2 or 3 months for a small team to finish, not 4 years for your entire studio. Even with Wind Waker HD, a more advanced remaster or port, Nintendo stated it took around 5 months to develop, and a lot of that time was spent just experimenting with its new engine and lighting system, as they switched the game to the new Zelda Wii U engine, which Breath of the Wild was also developed with. And they even said they had a very small team. So a smaller team remade Wind Waker in HD using a new engine, creating new textures, adding and removing lots of content in just 5 months. But a large team supposedly took 4 years to port a smaller game using the same engine with only minor changes to the Switch, longer than it took to make the original game. Obviously, they didn't spend this entire time working on what they likely had a smaller team port in just 6 months at the longest. In the past 7 to 8 years, all they've released is a simple port. And not worked on anything else? No. Reggie and Nintendo confirmed a Metroid game for Wii U was being developed, and would be a surprise. However, none released or have been announced for Switch. Yes, we have Dread, but that only began after Samus Returns released on 3DS. With us never finding out anything about the game and never finding out what Retro was working on, I feel there is a strong chance of that game being some version of the Metroid Wii U game Nintendo hinted at, or the Metroid Prime Remake or Trilogy remaster. Rumors at the time suggested they were working on a Star Fox game, which has never been confirmed. Miyamoto himself stated he would love for Retro to develop a Zelda game, which fueled its own set of rumors, as Nintendo is quick to deny rumors and leaks if they are true. Check out this video here for a huge list of this. They also never really go out of their way to tease something if they have no plans for it. And it just so happens, this was also around the time Nintendo was allowing other developers, even smaller third parties, to work on the Zelda franchise, such as Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D from Grezzo, Twilight Princess HD from Tantalus, Hyrule Warriors from Team Ninja, Monolith Soft was helping them on Breath of the Wild, and who knows what other teams they had. After all, why would the creator of Zelda continue teasing and saying he wants Retro to work on Zelda 3 or 4 years in a row if he had no real plans for them to? The original Metroid Prime 1 took less than 3 years to develop. Prime 2 took less than 2 years, Prime 3 took less than 3 years, and the Trilogy collection took less than 2, which added higher resolution textures, had huge improvements to the engine's code to allow the game to run faster and smoother, had bugs and other glitches fixed, and completely changed the controls for the first game. This same interview also states most of the Trilogy port was developed by only 4 people. Yes, 3 games, only 4 people. In 2011, Nintendo had some interesting promotion around the Trilogy, releasing a signed copy for auction, then placing the Wii version for sale digitally on the Wii U eShop, which led to even more rumors of an HD version coming. And it seemingly wouldn't take that long, especially if they put a larger team on it. And from everything we know, it seemingly wouldn't take that long to finish, especially if they put a larger team on it. While we don't exactly know if these rumors were true, it is what most people believed. Why didn't it release or be announced? Metroid has almost always been a game with very low sales, which is why it never released like The Legend of Zelda or Mario has. And thanks to Metroid Other M, around this time, the franchise was becoming even less and less popular. On top of all of this, the Wii U itself wasn't selling very well. Nintendo likely didn't want to take the risk of having Retro spend more time on something they likely wouldn't have made much of a profit on. So development may have been put on hold until they felt it could do better, and they switched to a new game, somewhat similar to what Nintendo has been doing by taking lots of games that sold well, and many that sold poorly on the Wii U and re-releasing them on the Switch, which in every case has sold unbelievably well. It's likely, if a team was working on this, they were moved back to the main team, which ended up releasing Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. Around this time, Nintendo revealed Metroid Prime Federation Force. In multiple interviews with Reggie about petitions for a real Metroid Prime game, many times he said Federation Force may not be the Metroid game fans were expecting, but Nintendo knows exactly what fans want. They know the community wants to see a straight-up Metroid game. Some specific quotes. Look, we know that the fans want a straight Samus Aran game. We also know that the best way to launch a game like that is to surprise and delight them, to give them a launch date in an environment like this, let them play it. And once again, he states, "We know the community wants to see a straight up Metroid game. We know it." All of this implying that, obviously, Nintendo did know fans wanted a real Metroid Prime game, which, as you can imagine, fueled even more rumors. This was between the time of the 4-year gap between Tropical Freeze and its Switch port, where Retro had nothing announced, leading people to think the unannounced game they were working on was the Trilogy or a Prime 4. Later on, Nintendo officially announced they created a new team to work on Metroid Prime 4 that wasn't Retro. Now, when releasing a brand new game in a series, Nintendo will usually release a port or remake, one example being Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD before Breath of the Wild. This is when rumors began switching from the Trilogy being remastered to Prime 1 being completely remade with a new engine, which would take a lot longer than a simple port, and explains why it had been so long since a Retro release. Then in 2019, Nintendo would have Retro drop everything and switch to Metroid Prime 4. This could leave a small team or another studio to pick up development on Prime 1. So a lot of this was just an idea trying to make sense of all of the rumors based on official statements, interviews, and announcements in order to make sense out of all of the rumors. Obviously, a lot of those rumors probably were fake, but when it's coming from a reliable source, like this new one, you can actually put your faith behind it. A lot of people will say I won't believe it until Nintendo officially announces it, but again, going back to the video that I mentioned earlier, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of times where Nintendo has completely denied something just to officially announce it, sometimes literally the next day. This is the only scenario I can think of that properly explains the lack of any new games from Retro in almost 8 years. To sum up, the persistent rumors and leaks and Nintendo's own hints. They began the Trilogy on Wii U, but Nintendo felt it wouldn't sell well. Nintendo had Retro work on Tropical Freeze, then go back to the Trilogy or start the actual remake of Prime 1 with a new engine for Switch, then finally giving them Prime 4. Essentially, having development on the Trilogy or Prime 1 continue to start and stop over and over. And this wouldn't be the first time Nintendo has done this with some of their games. As stated in the beginning, Daniel and I discussed this on our Hylian Gamescast, but I felt a more organized explanation with interviews, official statements, and everything visually on screen to follow along with would be better. But honestly, now I feel our original discussion on all of this was a bit more entertaining and interesting. So if you would like, please check that out as well. We have a few new Patreon supporters that I would like to give a thank you to. If you would like your own shout out, then head over to patreon.com/GameOverJessie, where you can receive a ton of different rewards while helping us out. Those of you who are just donating a single $1, that really does help more than you would think. So, thank you Monica Spath. Thank you Monica Spath, NORNARB, Shadow to Us, SOBERX, ANDREMOI, NATSU, Rusty Caulfield, Zoe M, Candy, David Guthman, Ashton Wren, BKRS7, Blargnar, Chad Costin, Gus Calvo, Henry, Jesse Birch, Jesse Wood, Jon Snow, Larulian Sheep, Lovable Christie, Mr. Monocled Metroid, Super NX64, and ZAIN.